4.8 million years ago, the Earth was wild, raw, and untamed. In East Africa's rift valleys, strange figures began to walk upright. These early hominins weren't quite human yet, but they were no longer apes either. With strong arms, small brains, and curious eyes, they stood between two worlds, animal and future human. The environment was harsh. Predators stalked the grasslands, and food was never guaranteed. But these first walkers were about to spark something unimaginable: the long journey of human evolution. Meet Australopithecus anamensis, one of our earliest ancestors. These hominins lived around Lake Turkana, in what's now Kenya and Ethiopia. They were small, around 4 feet tall, but walked upright on 2 legs. Their lives were a mix of tree climbing and ground roaming. Their teeth suggest a diet of fruits, seeds, and tough plants. They didn't use tools yet, but their hands were evolving slowly, preparing for the grasping, crafting, and building that would one day define humans. Life back then was pure survival. These early humans lived in small bands, likely foraging during the day and huddling together for warmth and safety at night. Communication was mostly gestures and grunts. There were no languages, only instinct, expression, and imitation. Social bonds were vital. Protecting one another from leopards or hyenas meant the difference between life and death. Cooperation wasn't just helpful, it was hardwired into their evolution. The African savanna was dangerous. Saber-toothed cats, crocodiles, and giant hyenas roamed freely. For early humans, staying alive meant constant vigilance. They developed an acute awareness of smells, sounds, and movement. Children learned through watching adults. Mistakes were deadly. A slip from a tree, a wrong step in the grass could mean death. There were no shelters, no fire, no weapons, just instinct, group unity, and determination to live another day in a brutal world. These early hominins didn't build homes or hunt in teams. Instead, they scavenged what was left behind by predators. Bones with leftover meat, discarded fruit, or termite mounds became sources of nutrition. Sharp stones might have been used for cutting flesh, though unintentionally. Their minds were still primitive, but curiosity sparked innovation. Each generation learned a little more, pushed a little further. Evolution doesn't leap, it crawls. And in those slow crawls, humanity was beginning to rise. Climate was a powerful force. The earth was shifting, forests retreated, and open plains expanded. This forced ancient apes to adapt or vanish. Bipedal walking became more useful for covering ground and spotting predators. It freed the hands for carrying infants, tools, or food. Over time, natural selection favored those who could walk, think, and react quickly. Evolution sculpted the hominin body into a survival machine. The world was harsh, but those who adapted endured. Food was scarce, and survival meant eating almost anything. Roots, berries, insects, and the occasional carcass left by lions. They didn't cook or season meals raw and rough was the norm. Their stomachs adapted to bacteria and parasites. They ate quickly, always watching their surroundings. One eye on the food, one on the horizon. Hunger pushed them farther each day. They followed animal migrations, water sources, and seasonal plants, always moving, always searching for the next meal. Water meant life. Early humans tracked rivers, springs, and even followed elephants, knowing they never strayed far from water. Drinking directly from muddy pools came with risks, but there was no choice. At times, they dug shallow holes in dry riverbeds to reach underground moisture. During droughts, they chewed on roots or sucked dew off leaves. Water wars weren't fought with weapons. They were races of endurance. If you reached the source last, you died. Social life was basic but vital. Small groups of 10 to 30 individuals roamed together. Bonds were built through grooming, vocal calls, and physical proximity. There was no spoken language, yet just grunts, facial expressions, and body movement. These early humans learned to recognize danger, share food, and care for their young together. Group strength increased chances of survival. Alone, you were food. Together, you were a challenge even for the deadliest predators. Violence was part of life. Early hominins fought predators, rival groups, and sometimes each other. There were no laws, no morals, only instincts. If a stranger came too close to food or children, they were attacked. Strong individuals dominated weaker ones. Leadership wasn't chosen, it was earned through fear or strength. Injuries were fatal without medicine. A broken limb could mean abandonment. Mercy was rare. But through this struggle, unity slowly evolved. Parenting was dangerous and exhausting. Mothers carried infants at all times, often while climbing, running, or hiding. Fathers had no defined role yet. Babies were born vulnerable and dependent. Without tools or protection, they were easy prey. Mothers relied on the group for help. If a child cried too loudly, predators listened. Silence was survival. The loss of a child was common, but the instinct to protect and nurture never faded. It only grew stronger with each generation. Night brought new terrors. Early humans had no fire, no light, no shelter. They slept in trees or hidden areas, huddled close for warmth and safety. The sounds of hyenas, leopards, and snakes filled the darkness. Fear of the night became embedded deep in the human psyche. Moonlight was both a guide and a warning. Those who survived the night passed on their cautious genes. Those who didn't vanished without a trace. Communication slowly advanced. Simple calls and gestures turned into shared meanings. A certain grunt could mean danger, while another signaled food. This was the beginning of language. Though still far from speech, facial expressions became tools of survival. Fear, anger, curiosity, all conveyed without words. Eye contact grew powerful. These primitive forms of communication helped avoid fights, share discoveries, and warn the group. Every sound mattered. Every look told a story. The landscape shaped behavior. Grasslands meant movement. Trees offered safety. Caves were temporary shelters, but often occupied by predators. Rocks and cliffs became natural hiding spots. Geography dictated tactics. Mountains slowed movement. Rivers split groups. Early hominins became experts at reading terrain. They knew where food grew, where lions hunted, and how to avoid danger zones. Their mental maps were detailed, even without a written word. Nature was their classroom and death the final exam. Injury was a death sentence. A twisted ankle meant you slowed the group. A deep cut invited infection. There were no bandages, no doctors. Survival depended on resilience. Some limped forward, others were left behind. But there's evidence that early humans sometimes helped the injured, dragging or feeding them. This shows the early spark of empathy, the emotional roots of humanity. Even in this brutal world, compassion began to take form. Death was constant, but it taught them caution. They saw what happened to the careless. Fallen group members were not buried, but abandoned or eaten by scavengers. Yet over time, something changed. Some groups began returning to places where others died. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe memory. These were the first emotional footprints of grief. A pause, a look, a silence, something almost human began to stir. The dead left more than bones. They left lessons. The African savanna was both home and battlefield. Tall grasses concealed threats. Lions hunted in silence. Crocodiles waited at watering holes. Early hominins had no claws, no fangs, no speed. But they had something better: awareness. They learned to read tracks, to spot movement, to follow vultures circling overhead. Every sense sharpened. Instincts evolved. Each survival was a victory. And in time, those victories shaped creatures that didn't just survive, they adapted, remembered, and passed wisdom on. Some began crafting shelters simple at first, using sticks, leaves, and mud. These weren't permanent homes, but temporary safety zones from rain, wind, or predators. Fire, still rare. was a game changer when found. Warmth at night, protection from beasts, even cooked food. Once they learned to control fire, likely through observation of lightning or volcanic sparks, everything changed. Fire became the heart of the tribe. Around it, they gathered, spoke, rested. The spark of civilization began here. Parenting, too, was an evolutionary leap. Unlike most animals, hominin babies were born helpless. Raising them took years. This meant stronger family units, tighter communities, and shared responsibility. A child wasn't raised by two, it took the whole group. This investment built emotional depth, early teaching, and social structure. It forced cooperation and long-term thinking. The bond between mother and child, or elder and youth, wasn't just love, it was survival. And that made early humans different. The first tools became more than survival, they became memory. A specific stone for cutting meat, a sharpened stick for digging roots. They weren't thrown away, they were kept, carried, and reused. This suggests planning. It suggests identity. My tool, my way of doing it. This marked the beginning of culture. Each chipped stone wasn't just function, it was legacy. Every tool was a whisper across time. This worked. Learn from it. And so knowledge became inheritance. Hunting didn't start with spears. It started with patience. Early humans tracked injured animals for hours, sometimes days, waiting for them to collapse. They scavenged kills from lions and hyenas, risking death for scraps. Eventually, they learned to throw rocks, use sharp sticks, and set simple ambushes. Every kill meant survival for the group. Meat brought protein, strength, and brain development. The hunt shaped them, not just their bodies, but their minds and cooperation. Fire changed everything. Though it wouldn't be mastered for hundreds of thousands of years, the first encounters were accidental. Lightning strikes set savannas ablaze. Curious hominins approached cautiously. The heat scared them, but the warmth, light, and cooked meat drew them closer. Some even carried burning sticks until they learned to keep the flame alive. Fire became their first tool of control over the cold, over fear, and eventually over the night. With fire came community. People gathered around it to eat, groom, and rest. It extended their day, allowed storytelling through grunts and gestures, and created a social nucleus. Fear of the dark lessened. Fire kept predators at bay and fostered safety. Around the flames, emotions deepened. The first traces of culture ignited rituals, shared experiences, and the earliest sense of home. Fire wasn't just a tool, it was the beating heart of their tribe. Tool-making marked the dawn of innovation. Stones were chipped into sharp edges for cutting, digging, and scraping. These tools were primitive, but revolutionary. Early humans began selecting specific stones, testing shapes, refining their strikes. This was problem-solving in its rawest form. Over generations, skill passed through observation, not words. A child watched, mimicked, and learned. Each tool was a survival edge. In a world of teeth and claws, stone became their silent ally. Brain evolution accelerated. Bigger brains meant better planning, memory, and social behavior. But it also meant harder births. Mothers risked their lives giving birth to larger-headed babies. Infants were born earlier and more helpless, requiring longer care. This created stronger social bonds. Others helped raise young. Cooperation became essential. Intelligence and compassion evolved side by side, shaping not only how they survived, but how they began to truly live. Weather shaped destinies. Droughts forced migrations. Floods separated groups forever. Ice ages loomed in the distance, already whispering change. Early humans became climate refugees before the term even existed. They tracked seasons, learned patterns, followed animal paths. They moved not just with instincts, but growing knowledge. Survival meant adaptability. The earth changed constantly, and those who moved with it endured. Those who didn't faded into fossilized memory. Encounters with other species brought both danger and wonder. Homo habilis, Australopithecus, and other early cousins sometimes met. Some fought, some mated, some simply watched from the trees. These meetings shaped genetic futures. Not all lineages survived, but the mingling of traits, strength, endurance, brain power created hybrids better suited for the challenges ahead. Evolution was a harsh judge, but also a master sculptor. Each meeting rewrote the story of what it meant to be human. Curiosity bloomed slowly. A strange rock, an unfamiliar animal track. The stars above, they began to notice patterns. Maybe they stared longer at a moonlit river, or followed migrating birds with awe. Though they lacked language, they had wonder. This was the spark of imagination. Over generations, this led to symbols, art, and myth. But it began here, with a glance at the sky, and the feeling that there was something more. Migration was relentless. They didn't know it, but these early humans were the ancestors of all humankind. Generation after generation, they spread across valleys, mountains, and deserts. Africa was their cradle, but the world awaited. Each step was uncharted. Every sunrise brought new threats. Still, they walked on, guided by hunger, instinct, and something deeper, a drive to move forward, to find something better, even if they couldn't name it. And then came extinction. Not for all, but for many. Most branches of early humans vanished. Droughts, predators, disease, or simply bad luck erased them from history. They left no graves, no monuments, only bones and scattered tools. But they were not failures. They were steps. Without them, we wouldn't exist. Their survival, even briefly, carved paths our ancestors later walked. Every breath we take honors their struggles. Every word we speak echoes their silence. What remained? Memory in stone tools, traces in ancient soil, DNA, whispers in our blood. The early hominids are gone, but they are not lost. Their world was brutal, but beautiful. Hard, but full of meaning. In every tree we climb, every fire we light, every journey we take, we remember them. They were the first dreamers, the first survivors. And in their footsteps, we still walk. But what did a typical day look like? At sunrise, the group stirred from sleep in trees or hidden shelters. Elders stayed behind with children. Foragers scattered in search of roots, berries, and water. Hunters trailed herds from a distance. Danger lurked everywhere: snakes, predators, rival tribes. By sunset, they regrouped to share food and stories. Rest was brief. The night was filled with the howls of hyenas and leopards. Every day was a battle for survival. Relationships were critical. Bonds weren't just emotional, they were tactical. A trusted partner could watch your back or share a secret food source. Children were everyone's responsibility. Elders taught through example. Reputations formed. Some were skilled hunters, others clever gatherers. Cooperation was the difference between thriving and extinction. The roots of friendship, loyalty, and betrayal began here in silent gestures and life-saving alliances built under the scorching sun and the shadow of death. Death was constant, but never meaningless. A fall, a fever, a predator loss came quickly. Yet even in those early days, signs of mourning appeared. Bodies were sometimes placed carefully in holes, covered with stones or branches. Some were left with tools or bones, gifts for the next world. These acts suggest something profound, an early sense of the spiritual, or at least the sacred. Even without gods, they knew the weight of absence. Over time, their world shifted. Forests thinned, grasslands stretched. New animals arrived: zebras, elephants, giant buffalo. Hominids adapted or died out. Those who thrived, moved, learned, changed. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were evolving. Legs grew longer, tools got sharper, brains swelled with potential. The line between animal and human blurred. They weren't us yet, but they were on their way. One step, one idea, one adaptation at a time. And then came language. Not as we know it, but the beginning of it. Grunts had rhythm. Gestures grew complex. Over time, these signals became a code. Warnings, plans, even feelings could be shared. This was power, real power. It allowed teaching, storytelling, coordination. The first sparks of culture caught fire. With communication came memory. With memory came identity. And with identity came the idea of us. Not just apes with tools, but a people. By now, they had fire, tools, tribes, and shared knowledge. They could shape wood, carry water, make crude shelters. They learned to wait, to plan, to deceive prey. Each generation added a tiny layer of progress. They stood straighter, looked farther, thought deeper. The earth around them remained harsh, but they were no longer just surviving, they were experimenting with living. The future was forming in their bones, one generation at a time. Some even believed they had proto-art, scratches on bones, patterns on stones. Maybe they were nothing. Or maybe they were the first attempts to say, I was here. They decorated themselves with ochre, shells, animal teeth. Not for survival, but expression, for beauty, identity, status. These were not random acts. They were the roots of something ancient, creativity. The spark that would one day ignite civilization already flickered in their minds. And then came the Great Migration. Africa could no longer hold them. Small bands crossed deserts, followed rivers, braved mountains. Into the unknown they walked into Asia, Europe, and beyond. Some died, some vanished, but some gave rise to the ancestors of us all. From one continent came many peoples. From one fire, thousands more. The world was no longer wild, alone. It now had witnesses. And those witnesses would become rulers. Today, we live in cities, fly through skies, speak in digital echoes, but beneath our skin, we carry their blood. Their struggles shaped our hands. Their choices shaped our minds. Every invention, every word, every dream built on their bones. They didn't leave behind pyramids or scrolls. They left us. We are the monument. And if we listen closely, we can still hear them through wind, flame, and instinct, whispering from 4 million years ago. Survive, evolve, remember.